Where's... Oh, it's happening. Ooh, the Nick thing's happening. The most canceled man in America. All right, while we wait for this, let's aim train. I gotta work on some stuff. While we wait for this to actually begin, but now that we have audio, so we'll know. This is clean. I like this. I gotta like close my eyes. Oh my gosh, I'm shit. I'm shit. I'm shit. Pack it up. Pack it up. We gotta get out of here. Okay, we're good. Okay, we're gonna make it. Alright, yeah, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it. No, that's not it. That's not it. Here we go.
Today's guest is the most
Oh shit, it's happening, it's happening, it's happening.
Rock bottom looks like that. Broke, no income, no platform. Probably 80% of my inner circle completely abandoned me.
A Catholic boy from the suburbs of Chicago.
Dude, me, that was me. I switched up on him.
That is really the anatomy of how somebody is canceled.
I switched up on him
a full-time
so hard.
salary, and they start to poke and look for ways that they can hurt you, to persuade you to stop saying the things that you're saying.
But after years of forming his opinions and sharpening his debate skills, he asked one question that changed.
I like
everything.
the editing
Now,
of
you're
this.
able to talk a little bit more openly about, let's say, black crime. You're able to talk more about illegal immigration. You're able to talk about Indians in a derogatory way. But the one group you're still not allowed to criticize is...
In this episode, we'll hear from the voice that has divided a nation, expose the players trying to keep him silent, and question if he's really the villain they say he is, or the mirror that America doesn't.
That wasn't my music,
Everything
Jakey.
that I did was for America. It was for Christianity. It wasn't for hatred of other groups. You know, it's a longing for justice.
Nicholas J. Fuentes.
That was the YouTube
Welcome to the
waiting
Jack Neel
music.
podcast.
Yeah, great to be with you.
Yeah,
Goofball.
it's a pleasure to have you here, man. Guys, we are in an undisclosed warehouse right now. It's a little sketchy in here, but we thought it looked cool. So, Nick, you're banned on most social media platforms. You're on a no-fly list. Your bank accounts are frozen. You're investigated by the FBI, and you even had someone
There's
try to
3
come to your
mil on
house
YouTube.
to kill you.
Damn.
What exactly did you say that made you so dangerous?
Well, from the very beginning, the first thing that I said is that Israel is not our closest ally with the United States. And what is interesting is that so much has happened since that happened, which was about 8 years ago. And I guess it's important to understand how these things take place, which is that, for example, somebody showed up to my house with a gun trying to kill me because I said that after the election, I said, your body, my choice, which is like a twist on my body, my choice. I got doxxed. But my address had been on the internet because the SPLC posted it. Southern Poverty Law Center. This is one of these liberal outfits. They posted a photo of my house on their website.
Green
and
Monster
this is, by the way, one of the
That's
richest
crazy.
nonprofits on the left. They're up there with the ADL.
The
They're
original
very
Monster?
wealthy, very powerful. It's important to understand, they put the address out there, and crazy liberals, leftists got that, and they attacked my house because of something I said on Twitter. But it's important to know that I was targeted first by the SPLC, by the ADL. This is why my address is out there. This is why I was branded at one time a white supremacist and a white nationalist. And a lot of people don't understand that that is really the anatomy of how somebody is canceled. Is you say something that is against, let's say, the hegemonic left. You say something that is against the most powerful global special interests. And people don't realize it works this way. So, like, for example, you'll say, Israel's not our closest ally. And then a group like the ADL, which is a group, they're called Anti-Defamation League. They're against the defamation of Jewish people. A group like that will identify you as an enemy of their special interest, which is the Israel lobby. They will pay somebody, not a significant amount of money, but they'll pay somebody a full-time salary to then follow you around. How you make your money,
Jewish is
for a
censored?
living, your family, your employers,
This is
employees,
so
friends,
cocked.
associates, and they start to
cocked.
poke
Dude, I
and
need
look for
a snack
ways
so bad.
that they can hurt you, to persuade you to
hold on, I
stop
gotta eat this
saying
first.
the things that you're saying.
Yeah.
So in my case, from a very
Order
early age, I
Precocious
was not
Churros left.
really controversial when I got started. I didn't really say anything that was that out there, but I was saying that Israel's not our ally. So they put somebody on me. In this case, it was Jared Holt at Right Wing Watch. Right Wing Watch is a subsidiary of People for the American Way, which is a Soros-funded nonprofit. So this guy would watch my show every night. He was paid to do this. It's his job. And he was paid to look for every time I said anything controversial, anything that sounded controversial, any joke that sounded offensive. And his job was then to clip what sounded bad, post it on Twitter, and say that represented that I'm a white nationalist, I'm an extremist, Christian fanatic. And this has taken place over the course of 10 years. Ever since I was 18 years old, this is what I have been subjected to.
The OG
and after
Clipper,
10 years, you get a profile as all your worst clips, all the things that could sound bad. All those things have been compiled over your entire career, and then they make you out to be a fanatic, a nut job, a hateful person. And so that's how I got the reputation as a white nationalist, all of the above. What they then do, of course, is they rile up their base. So the person that showed up at my house was a 23-year-old kid. I don't actually know what his motivation was. The police never told me. I imagine he was maybe feeling bad about the election. He showed up at my house about a month after that. Maybe he was upset about my tweet about abortion or feminism. But he was effectively sicked on me by these types of groups that built up that catalog of horrible things that engage in that reputational destruction. And so that's just a little insight into how this, it's sort of the anatomy of a smear, the anatomy of that kind of labeling and that kind of smear campaign.
Who do you think invented cancel culture?
Cancel culture has been around forever. I think it's maybe a better way to say it is
that is a long-ass table for real.
And we live in an open society. I don't think there's a lot of assassinations anymore, although that's not really the case this year. Charlie
They're
Kirk
just staring at each other.
They tried to kill Donald Trump. But generally speaking, we don't live in a very violent political order. So what they do now is they engage in reputational destruction, character assassination. If they don't like what you're saying, they go out there and they, like I said, they look for your worst moment, a bad joke, a salacious personal scandal, and then they air that out to hurt your reputation and get you to apologize or stop saying what you're saying. And so I think that cancel culture has been around for a long time, but now the people that are using it the most, it is the billionaire political class. It is the oligarchs, effectively, because you look at the most powerful people that are running our country, they have blood on their hand. They have blood on their hands. These are some of the worst people in the world. We're just now seeing some of the Jeffrey Epstein files come out. This is a notorious trafficker who rolls with underage girls, engages in blackmail.
He's a rapist?
Of course, he dies under
He's
mysterious
a sexual
circumstances.
assaulter and
He's
a
friends
rapist?
with the most powerful people in the world.
People?
They're engaged in war crimes. They're engaged in corruption, bribery, lobbying. But billionaires are never canceled.
With the monster, yeah.
It's always small-time political activists. It's always rogue congressmen like Thomas Massey or Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right.
There's an asymmetry, which is to say that it's always media money and power that are using reputational destruction against the weaker people typically that have very little influence or very little power. And they do that to silence dissent. So cancel culture is something that is used mainly by the powerful. It's asymmetric warfare.
You noted on your stream last night, it led me to this logical conclusion that they kind of manufactured it in a way like, oh, this is racist, this is homophobic, this is transphobic. But really, the only effect you get is when you say something anti-Semitic, you know? Right. So, like, are you conspiratorial to the point where you believe that the whole thing was manufactured just so no one could say anything that was considered anti-Semitic by their standards?
I think it speaks to who wields the power in the country, because there's that famous adage, which is to learn who rules over you, learn who you're not allowed to criticize.
Voltaire said that.
That's attributed to Voltaire. Voltaire didn't say that, but
it was actually the white nationalist and pedophile.
And it goes without saying, if you're at your job, you can't criticize your boss. You can't ridicule or attack your boss. Why? Your boss has power over you. If you offend him, he'll fire you. Similarly, in the United States, for roughly the last 10 or 15 years, it was very acceptable to attack straight white men, Christians. They were the butt of every joke. You could make fun of Southerners. You could make fun of hillbillies with Southern accents. You could make fun of white people for not having a culture, not being able to dance, attribute all the evils of the world to white people, or Christians for that matter. You were not allowed to criticize racial and religious and ethnic minorities. You couldn't criticize blacks, Hispanics, Asians. Couldn't talk about mass migration. What has changed in the past year, though, is that it seems that some of the political correctness concerning the minorities has gone away. And in the past year, it seems now you're able to talk a little bit more
was not written by
about,
Voltaire, but white nationalist Kevin Alfred Strahm.
Fatigue. You're able to talk more about illegal immigration, which is largely an Hispanic issue. You're able to talk about Indians in a derogatory way. But what is interesting is that a year after the Trump revolution in 24, Trump gets back in, political correctness seems to be dead. You look across the board, you can still criticize white people, and the left frequently does. Now you're able to criticize non-white people and the racial ethnic minorities. But the one group you're still not allowed to criticize is Jews. If you're called racist, that gets laughed off now. If you're called anti-white, well, you know, the left is pretty openly anti-white. But to this day, you still cannot be, you know, so-called or in reality anti-Semitic. And if you're following the logic, you can't criticize the powerful, those that rule over you. That would seem to suggest that if you can't criticize, maybe they're the most powerful ethnic group in the United States of America.
Did you put a juice emoji over his mouth when he says that?
I do want to touch on that in a bit.
Juice.
First, I want to talk briefly about your backstory. I feel as though your interviews with Patrick Bet-David and Tucker kind of covered that fairly well. But some similarity that you and I have is you're a fellow speech and debate kid, right?
He's calling me out.
You won 4 competitions in extemporaneous speaking in 2015. Which is basically like giving a political speech on the fly. Do you think like being a debate kid kind of made you the speaker you are? Or do you think you've kind of always had this interest?
I always had this interest. I always loved politics ever since I was 12 or 11 years old. It was always my thing. I started to get into it really because I was just curious about the world. You sort of start to develop your consciousness around that age.
Juice
you could
emoji
say
ban
when
on
you're
TikTok?
like
Yeah,
10,
that's true.
11, 12 years old, start to become aware. And I just started to think about worldly things. I wanted to know about history. I wanted to know about politics. The 2012 election was coming up, and I was a very young boy, but I wanted to know what was happening. So I went all in, and I read as much as I could. I really got into the libertarian stuff. I got into Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, and then in high school,
Wait, we know this? Hold on, I just saw this.
Cuck is one of my favorite albums. I listen to that all the time, man. I love Cuck. Cuck is so great. It's honestly, Cuck is like top 5 EA albums for me.
Really did get into
in beef with anyone.
True, but crazy coming from him.
In that activity.
True, but crazy coming from
all the time. I'll never forget. I was at sectionals or regionals. I think I won sectionals and maybe got to regionals my junior year, and they gave us. One of the topics I got for extemporaneous speaking was about Obama. And in the speech, I said Obama wasn't born in America. And I think every judge ranked me in last place just because I said that.
That makes sense.
It was very left wing, yeah.
I had a fairly similar experience with the activity. I did quite well, actually. Like, I was a national champion in it. So, like, that's why I was so nerdy and went through your stuff. And I was like, how was Nick in this activity? Because he's a great speaker, but I can't imagine him doing that well with libertarian or conservative beliefs. Did you ever get kicked off the team, or were they pretty cool with you overall?
They were cool. The coaches knew that I was extremely conservative, and they were very liberal, but they were pretty tolerant. Ironically, it was a bit more tolerant before Trump ran for office.
Right. Yeah.
For some reason, I think that things had been polarized at that point, but Trump just took it to another level. So as a libertarian conservative, they were fairly tolerant. And that was maybe a less radical viewpoint also. That was sort of before nationalism came to the center. But no, they were fairly tolerant.
I think you kind of hinted who has the power to silence someone like you. But can you kind of give me an organizational chart of influence as you see it?
Sure. So I frequently talk about how the United States has a oligarchy. And maybe it's important to understand how power works in America. When people think about power, they think about government. They think about the president, they think about Congress, they think about elections and elected officials. But I think anybody that spends any amount of time thinking about this situation understands that there's a tremendous power of money in politics, because an elected official like the president has to raise $1 billion every 4 years. And who has the money to spend every 4 years $50 million, $100 million, without actually a tangible or direct return on investment? Maybe it's something qualitative, maybe it's something hard to calculate. It's not like, for example, buying a factory. Investing $100 million to buy influence is less tangible. Well, the answer is simple. It's billionaires. Billionaires have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend every 4 years. And you can go on Open Secrets and you can look at the top 10 individual contributors per cycle, and it's fairly consistent. It's people like Miriam Adelson. This cycle, it was Elon Musk, Tim Mellon, Reid Hoffman.
Pay attention, Jimbo. This is important. Oh, yeah, sorry.
So you have to understand about politics that it's a money system.
Nick hasn't even denied the
politics is
yet.
controlled
Fuck
by
this.
money.
Yeah, true.
And what does the money buy? Well, it buys favorable regulatory oversight. It buys favorable treatment in a particular jurisdiction, in a particular state, or from the federal government. And so to create an organizational flow chart, I would say something like this. You've got Congress and the presidency. They actually have to answer to their billionaire donors. Where do billionaires come from? Billionaires come from industries like Silicon Valley, Wall Street. Where do those people come from? Somebody at Silicon Valley comes from Stanford University. Where are all the big Silicon Valley founders and entrepreneurs from? They all come from Stanford University, which is the premier college that's in that area. And so you understand that it's a intelligentsia, academic, money, and political
Right.
system. And once you understand that we have a
Doing the
system that isn't
cucking from
primarily
Tucker,
about
yeah,
elections,
true.
then you maybe begin to understand how influence is actually exercised in the country. And I would say that for the most part, people's understanding of politics is basically correct. I think what they get wrong is they don't see how particular groups or special interests will try to control the bottlenecks or particular choke points in the system. So, for example, a lot of people talk about AIPAC, American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and they like to say, well, when you look at the biggest contributors, the biggest lobbies in politics, AIPAC doesn't tend to show up. Well, why is that? It's how AIPAC operates. AIPAC doesn't actually do a lot of direct
took this from the
giving to
novel
a particular
Chaos?
politician. But what
Tucker
they do is they
Carlson,
manage a
Advanced
number
Science?
of different billionaires or high-level
all
millionaires
doing that.
and their political giving. So they'll find the candidate they like, and if that person pledges allegiance to Israel, they'll pick up the phone and they'll call their group of donors.
Someone
and
call
all
Handsome
those
Truth.
donors will give as individuals. This way it doesn't show up on the paperwork. This is one of the ways it's concealed and obfuscated. Moreover,
Dude, I need a
in the last
PB&J.
cycle in
You ever-
2024, AIPAC marshaled $100 million to spend. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a ton of money, actually, because billions of dollars are spent across all the different elections, presidential election, congressional elections. But what did AIPAC do specifically? They singled out every congressman that voted against foreign aid to Israel last April, some progressives and one Republican, Thomas Massey. They funneled $100 million, a lot of that money, into those particular races. They funded primary candidates that would take the nomination from the incumbents. And so, for example, in Massachusetts and other states, you had progressive Democrats that took the nomination from an incumbent Democrat congressman. And what they do by focusing on, let's say, a handful of races, singling out, isolating the 3 or 4 congressmen and women that voted against, they make those people lose the election. What they do is create a chilling effect. They don't have to spend millions of dollars in every race. If they spend it in 3, everybody else gets the message. Which is they could single you out. They could target you. So a lot of people say it's just not worth the trouble. And this is how you can have AIPAC rally resources in just a few districts, but send a message to all of Congress, which is, if you go against us, if you go against Israel, you will lose your seat. So there's this process of refinement. It's not to say that everybody in Congress is necessarily being bribed to the tune of millions of dollars, but everybody knows the score, which is that in order to be in Congress, you have to pass that check. If you don't, you might be dealing with $20 million from AIPAC funding a primary challenger in your district. And that's just sort of one example of how they'll take a bottleneck or a choke point and a very determined, motivated, organized, powerful group can have an outsized and disproportionate amount of influence.
This feels like a very Gen Z blunt question to ask, but like, why do they even want to be in Congress? Like, why does Trump even want to be president if he can't like really enact real change? Like, is it just a money motivation that they have access to?
That's sort of an interesting question, because everybody assumes that corruption is all about money.
Right.
A lot of people think that someone like Donald Trump or the politicians, they are there for their own personal enrichment. They're getting paid off. The rich get richer. But I think it's deeper than that. What they really are after is power. And somebody like Donald Trump or a congressperson, everybody wants to be the king of the hill. Everybody that's in Congress or in the Senate, they want to be the president one day.
But is it implied power or is it actual power?
It's actual power.
Okay.
And it's there's sort of a deal that's made, which is they know that they don't have absolute power. So, for example, with Trump, will need buy-in from powerful factions in the country.
I forgot
How
last
does he
week?
get to be the president? He's going to need buy-in from Wall Street, from Silicon Valley. He needs their backing.
This week.
And there's a trade-off that's made.
And I didn't
I'll
want to
scratch
forget.
your back if you make me president. If I get to be king, I'll give you favorable treatment.
I'm
So
here.
Trump is not going to have true, absolute power, personal power over everything,
I mean, two of these.
but he might have personal power as president to reward his friends and punish his enemies. He's going to be the king of the hill for 4 or 8 years. He'll have his legacy.
Who is
That's a very
Farash you
powerful
talking to?
motivator that I don't think people give enough serious consideration.
Nick, if you could make one government agency disappear overnight, which would it be?
I would probably make the FBI disappear overnight. I would, to be honest, I would
Vengeance.
take a lot of the intelligence agencies. I'd take all of them put together and get rid of them overnight.
Why?
Because every single one of them is completely infiltrated by foreign agents.
We would start new
And
intelligence
I think that the
agencies.
United States should have an intelligence service, and we need a
Ooh.
federal law enforcement. So you need something like an
Ooh.
FBI. You need something like a CIA. But the problem is that all of the federal law enforcement and intelligence, which maybe have the most freedom of action, they have arguably the most raw power
New
out of anybody in the
corporate
country.
intelligence agency run by
Over generations, they have all been
James
systematically infiltrated by
Jesus
various nation
Zoomer.
states. A good example is our national security advisor, Mike Waltz. Now, this is not strictly speaking part of the intelligence apparatus, but it's maybe the most egregious example in the national security state. Mike Waltz is the national security advisor. He creates the briefings and the plans and all of the memos for the president on national security. So anything concerning war,
so
terrorism, proliferation of WMD, he creates that briefing. He informs the president. Trump appointed Mike Waltz. Mike Waltz was fired 3 months after he got the job because he was texting Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, on an encrypted Israeli messaging app. And they believed that he was actually working on behalf of Netanyahu to push the United States into a war with Iran. So when you have that kind of
I don't know why it got so hot. They usually are just room temp after
organs of the government, the national security state.
I microwaved it for 15 seconds and it's like on fire.
You don't know who's working for who. You have to fire everybody and then rebuild all of it with loyal Americans, people that it's unambiguous are working for the United States of America.
Senators Ted Cruz and Mitch McConnell denounce you. Vice President J.D. Vance says that you're a total loser, disavows you, and you're not part of the MAGA movement. Do you think they're embarrassed by you, or do you think they're afraid of you?
And he's a bitch.
They are afraid of what I represent, which is
like Colby BJ?
What has happened
They're in the
MAGA.
freezer. You freeze them.
It started out as a revolutionary
brick.
movement. What was the message of MAGA? It was America first, Americanism, not globalism. And deeper than that, Trump said, when I get elected in 2016, he said, we are going to throw out all the super PACs, all the lobbyists, all the global banks, the global special interests. People forget how radical that first campaign was. And then immediately, once Trump won the election, all the interests came in. The Republican Party filled the White House with their personnel. The special interests like Sheldon Adelson, like Ken Griffin from Citadel on Wall Street, all the interests poured in, and they gradually and slowly captured Trump, Mar-a-Lago, MAGA, and they made the Trump movement serve the GOP and their special interests, such that by 2020, Trump was unrecognizable. At 16, he said, we're going to end foreign wars. We're going to build a wall. We're going to end free trade. In 2020, he was bragging about moving Israel's embassy to Jerusalem, lowest black unemployment in history, cut the corporate tax rate by over 10%. It was a completely different campaign. And what I represent, I not only represent the young people, but I represent the actual promise of the original Trump revolution. Realizing America first, Americanism, not globalism. And so you have people like Ted Cruz or J.D. Vance. They see MAGA as effectively a form of a Trojan horse. It looks like and is dressed up like something new, something different, something unconventional that actually challenges power.
Oh my gosh.
In reality, now that Trump has been
copy.
elected the second time, it's a true Trojan horse. What awaits inside the Trump movement is lobbyists. Inside of it is the corporate interest. That's why Trump gets elected. He buries the Epstein files. He bombs Iran. He extends the corporate tax cuts. If somebody like myself is able to have a platform, then we will expose how MAGA has been corrupted. And then potentially in 2028, we might get another crack at actually having a populist takeover of the GOP. They would be happy if people would pretend that Trump of 2024 is the same as Trump of 2016, so that it's going to protect their grift. That's why they don't like me.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Nick, I did some deep research on you because I kind of had the same suspicion that Tucker says he has about maybe you being a Fed. But I asked pretty much the only person I would trust about this answer, and he said he'd had some conversations with you. I can't dox him, but it's a very wealthy fellow. And he basically
had a conversation with
ChatGPT. You can't be bought and you can't be blackmailed in the same way that maybe someone like Trump could be, which is a reason that I think your message is considered so dangerous, is because they know they can't really get to you. But as far as Trump, like, what do you think was the moment that he became compromised? Or do you think he ever truly wanted like a genuine MAGA?
I think that Trump is not an ideological force. And if you pay very close attention to the things that he says, it's very clear that his skill set is in marketing and campaigning. He knows how to play to an audience. He knows how to give people what they want. And I think what happened in 2016 is that he identified that there was a need that had to be filled, which is to say that the Republican base was very clear about what they wanted. They were mad about the cultural transformation of the country. That's why they really didn't like Obama. So Trump came out with a message that said, we're going to make America great again. We're going to say Merry Christmas again. We're going to take all the illegals and get them out. And we're going to blame China for taking our jobs. He knew the message that people wanted to hear. He effectively pandered and is a true demagogue in that sense. And then once he got elected, I'll never forget there was something very specific he said in 2017. He did one of his first rallies after winning the presidency. He said, and his
I'm switching up on all my day ones.
Lock her up about Hillary Clinton. And Trump, responding to the chant, said, that's something that plays good before the election, he said. And in that, he gave away the whole game, which is, did he really want Hillary Clinton to face justice? No, there was never any intention to put Hillary Clinton in jail. He knew that saying that would help him win, saying that would endear him to the voters.
Inbound?
Once he was elected, he realized that's not going to be politically acceptable. That will not be tolerated by the system. And so he wasn't going to stand on business and actually fight for accountability, no matter what it cost him, politically speaking. He said, well, if that's inconvenient, then I just won't do it. And so he sort of gave away the game. I think that from the beginning, it was always about him becoming president. And that's why his politics have changed so much, so wildly over the years, whether it was the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. You get a different Trump in every decade. So I think at the end of the day, it was always about him.
So you would assume that they kind of already had control over him, already had blackmail on him, and he kind of knew that?
I don't,
because I'm not sure what's in the Epstein files. I haven't looked at it too closely. My editor was telling me something about Donald Trump and Bill Clinton.
Thank you, Young Nibba.
Yeah, kind of tell me about that. And if you think that Trump is like
White Builder, you've been gifted a sub. Let's go. Thank you, Young Nibba. Huge shout out.
I'm skeptical that Trump actually did anything wrong. At least I was very skeptical because by they, I mean the Democrats have been showing the videos and pictures of Trump and Epstein for over a decade. And I really thought that if there was anything there, we would have seen it by now. And there's some truth to this argument that they did everything to stop him in 2016 and 2020 and 24. If there was anything really damning in the files, wouldn't we see it by now?
Yeah, it's like, well, why is this happening now? That's my question. Yeah.
They charged him in New York, in Georgia, 2 federal indictments. If he did anything criminal, they would have brought it to light. That being said,
looks good, boss.
Trump does not want the Epstein files to get out, and he's now involved in an active cover-up.
Or Aztec
because
Goth?
He came out with his Department of Justice in July and said there are no Epstein files. They don't exist. There's no emails, no letters, no personal effects. There's nothing left, he said, other than the actual child material, which would show indecent images or photos or videos
child
of
porn,
the underage
so we
girls
can't
being
release
used.
it.
Well, we now know that was a lie.
What do you want?
Because, of
Child
course,
porn?
now Congress has compelled the
You sick
DOJ
fucks.
to release the things they have. And we've seen that there's tens of thousands of emails that are already out there. There'll be tens of thousands of more documents. So now it begs the question, why did Trump lie? Why did the DOJ lie and say there were no files when they knew that the files existed? It would seem to suggest that Trump is in the files. He knows he's in the files, and he's worried about what is in them. Here's
Dude,
another
and then
question.
look, and then
If
a Christmas
what was
variant
in the files about
Dude.
Trump was innocuous,
for next month.
why would he be fighting so hard to keep it suppressed? It might be embarrassing. It might be politically harmful to him. At this point, it's more politically harmful to cover it up. They had to shut down Congress a month early to keep that from coming out. So the question now is, if there is nothing bad in the files about you, because we know you're in them and we know you lied about that, why are you fighting so hard to prevent it from coming out? We almost have to draw a negative inference that there's something in there that he doesn't want to get out because it might be criminal or outrageous or deeply offensive to our conscience. And I would say all you have to do is look at the timeline to consider who might be holding the cards there. Elon Musk, in I think it was June or May, went to the Oval Office for the last time, and it didn't go well. He left the meeting, went on Twitter, and said Trump will not release the Epstein files because he knows he's in them.
Oh, shit.
1 week later, Israel attacked Iran. This is the war they've wanted for 20 years. Realistically, they've wanted it for 45 years. And every president, from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden, didn't give it to them. Israel bombed Iran. A week later, Trump bombed Iran. The United States is effectively now in a state of war with Iran. This is what they wanted for half of a century.
Yeah, I'm
After
not paying
the war
attention.
ends, Netanyahu
just
visits the
making
White House
stickers
to
right now.
celebrate that Israel and the United States destroyed Fordo, Iran's nuclear complex. It was the day before that visit that the DOJ produced a memo saying the Epstein files would never be released because they don't exist. So it's bookended from when the Epstein files are brought up as a threat against Trump to when they're buried by the DOJ with the war in Iran. And given that Epstein was potentially Israeli intelligence, I think all signs point to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem controlling those files.
Quick one. Here, Nick and I are talking about corruption in the U.S. government,
one.
so if you're someone who distrusts it and has a lot of cryptocurrency,
Quick one.
you're going to want to hear about today's
Well,
sponsor, I Trust Capital.
Oh,
These
shit.
guys are currently the biggest supporters of this
Oh, shit.
podcast,
Okay.
and when they reached out to me and explained what they did, it literally sounded like a cheat code. See, with their platform, you can take an existing IRA or 401k and convert it
This
into
real
one
life?
that lets you buy Bitcoin,
No way.
Ethereum, and 80 other cryptocurrencies while getting the same tax-saving benefits. You can, of course, start an IRA or 401k from scratch if you're bullish on Bitcoin and want to save on taxes if you decide to pull out. I just recently moved my Roth IRA over to their platform so I could use it to buy Bitcoin, but
shit.
if you guys want to do
Is
the
that for real?
same, just go to jackneel.com
fuck. Okay.
/iTrust
I gotta
or
check
scan
that
the
out.
QR code on screen.
All
Again,
right.
that's jackneel.com /iTrust, or you can hit the first link in the description to get a $100 bonus. Thank you again to iTrust Capital for sponsoring this episode. Not many people wanted to do it, so these guys are pretty cool. Anyway, back to the podcast. Nick, I do want to ask, during deplatforming, you mentioned anxiety and insomnia. Is that something you experienced?
Yes, absolutely.
What did rock bottom of that look like?
666 Darky just resubscribed.
Well,
Thank you,
it wasn't
666 Darky. I
dramatic.
appreciate it.
I'm
Big
not a
shout
very
out.
emotional
Let's
person,
go.
but for me, rock bottom was this. I go to the Capitol on January 6th, and I really had a great career. I had already been canceled twice. First by Daily Wire, then by Turning Point USA. At that point, I'd been banned on YouTube and PayPal. So I was thoroughly canceled at this point.
Rock bottom like
spite of that,
SpongeBob.
I had
The
almost
monster
100,000 subs on
advertisement.
D Live,
True.
which was PewDiePie's live streaming platform. I was getting over 10,000 live viewers a night. I was making pretty good money. I was making about $50,000 a month as a completely canceled person. I had
Dude, you're
a
gonna
live
love this
audience,
next Pepe.
subscriptions, a good income. I had a big following on Twitter. The week after January 6th, I got banned from D Live. I got banned from my bank that I was at, Bank of America. My checking account was shut down. My money was frozen.
Can't have
All
shit in
my
this country,
cash
man.
was frozen by the
Fuck this
DOJ.
place.
I was put on a federal no-fly list. I was banned by my payment processors. I was banned by DLive. So I went from having a career in spite of being canceled, fighting so hard to emerge from that kind of culture, only to, because of J6, 2 weeks later, not even having a website to stream from, having no income, being broke, having no cash. And then, because I was effectively then a loser,
Okay, another new emo inbound.
because I was so thoroughly deplatformed, many of my
Check this
friends
out.
began to turn on me. And all the other people that were there on January 6th, they feared that maybe they would be a subject of an investigation. Maybe they would be deplatformed.
Dude, that's why
So
I flipped on his
probably
ass.
80% of my inner circle completely abandoned me.
Dude, that's literally
And
why
so
I
rock
turned. I
bottom
switched up on him.
looks like that. Broke,
New
no
sticker?
income,
Look at my
no
new sticker.
platform, truly banned from everything, betrayed by 8 out of 10 of my friends.
Thoughts?
Was there a specific person that kind of cut you off that hurt more than the others?
No, at that point, I was pretty desensitized.
Right.
So no, not in particular.
Nick, you've discussed
I wish they weren't so tiny
an
in the chat, though. I wish they were a
uncanny
little bigger.
about modern
stickers.
society. Why do you think everything
Imbo switched
feels
up on his day
off?
ones. Yeah, 100% immediately.
Well, I think that
I
everything
said,
feels
thanks
off
for putting me
because
on,
we are
bastard, and I ran
we're
away.
not living the way that probably most of
thanks,
our ancestors
loser.
lived. And I'm not
Enjoy
a big
prison.
trad guy or like, so much of what you see on the internet now is this idea something went wrong with modernity, we need to return. And so some people say we need a primal diet, we need an ancestral diet.
Cut them like this,
Some
no
people say
legs,
we need to
maybe.
return to the wilderness and get more in nature, be more environmental or something like that. I think it's social. I think it's all social, which is to say that we're maybe the first generation that is completely atheistic. There's no religion.
Slow just gifted
I
4
think that's
subscriptions
maybe
on
unique
Kick.
Oh shit,
in the
thank you,
history of
Slay. Let's
mankind,
go!
because even
Big
primitive
shout out.
humanity
Let's
had
go!
animism, believed that gods were in
Thank
the
you for the very
animals and
generous
in
support. I
objects, or
appreciate it.
you had pagan barbarians
Dude,
that
he's
had their
pandering
pantheon
to
of gods, and then
Arval
you had
again.
Christians and Muslims. And so we've always been believers. We've always built idols or statues or shrines.
Oh, who got them?
This is the first
4
generation
gifted
that has
subs.
no connection to the divine,
Welcome,
the
House,
supernatural.
Blepe,
There's
Doom
no sense
Paul,
that there's
and
anything
Zeds.
beyond this plane
Welcome, all
of
of you.
existence, beyond death even,
Appreciate it.
waiting
Thank
for
you,
us.
Slay.
That's one. Two is that we have no social fabric either.
Okay, try
You look
this
at
sticker.
the families, and when we think of what is traditional, we think of the nuclear family. And even that is not very traditional. 2 parents and their kids. What about grandparents? What about uncles and cousins and big families? Now, if you're
Try
lucky,
this one.
you have 2 parents and maybe 1 sibling. That's your family. What's your community? A lot of people don't even know their neighbors. They don't know their next door neighbors. They don't have a ton in common with the people in their community. And so their social life might begin and end in like high school. You're raised by your parents, you go to school, you
New
finish
version?
school,
Is
then
that
you
even
move
better?
into an apartment as a single man or woman, and you go to work. That's your life. This is a completely atomized existence. So we're not connected to the eternal, the transcendent, God. We're also not connected to each other in any meaningful way. People older than us, younger than us. We don't have big families. We don't have large communities or real society where people are rising and falling in connection with each other. And so I think that what really defines the modern age is how alone we all are as individuals. And maybe this is a product of liberalism. Maybe this is a product of the Enlightenment, the Reformation, but we are truly disconnected from maybe our biology, from our souls, and we're disconnected from our families and everybody that coexists with us in time. And I think that's made life very lonely and then therefore very dysfunctional for a lot of people.
I do want to clarify, you said this earlier, you hinted at it, but before we get into your actual views, because I feel like what you've been stating is more so just logical conclusions, observations. Like, why, in your words, Nick, do you think young men trust your voice above everyone else's?
BBC emote.
Why are you the voice
no.
for
Come
Gen
on,
Z
come on.
men?
What are we thinking?
I think people like me because I'm authentic. And authenticity, ironically, has become like a marketing term. Like I see TikToks where people say, how do you market yourself? You have to be authentic. And it's like, well, isn't there something like deeply ironic about that you're like having to be self-consciously authentic to appeal and pander to people? But I think that in particular in politics, everybody is so calculating
Paul Nick, he's
and
lonely.
so fake
Right.
and
True.
very careful about what they say and trying to appeal to everybody, pander to everybody, try so hard not to offend. And I think that especially after wokeness, and we're maybe getting on the other side of that.
Wokeness.
People
True.
look at me and they find a lot of the things I say offensive or outrageous, or, you know, maybe they don't like certain things about me. But what maybe they all can respect is that good, bad, or ugly, there's no pretense. There's no facade. It's just me. And maybe there is an inherent credibility in that, because if somebody is out there, and you see this all the time, the apology videos, people, you know, they won't even talk about politics for fear of offending one group or the other. They try to straddle the line. You get the sense that you're not really getting that real person. You get the sense that the whole thing is sort of an elaborate performance. And of course, why would we trust somebody that's performing? It raises a natural question, which is, what are they trying to achieve? Is it about fame, money, something like that? If they look at a guy that's really willing to just say anything and everything, or maybe spitefully saying things to piss people off, they say, well, clearly this guy isn't in it for the money or the fame or to climb a political career or any career ladder for that matter. This is somebody that people can relate to. So I think I'm a very relatable person.
I saw last night that you said you represent hope as well, which I found interesting.
Let's try
I think we'll later get
this
into
one.
what your hopes are for America
New
and what you
emote,
actually
try
want to
this
see
one.
changed. But so
Pixel
what would you
Pilgrim.
say is more dangerous
that one
to the
look?
West? TikTok, fentanyl, OnlyFans.
Well, what they all have in common is they're all adaptive.
That worse?
People get on fentanyl and they use pornography and
I
they
don't
use
know.
TikTok, really all for the same reasons. Do people really like TikTok? If you doom scroll for 3 hours, which a lot of people do, and somebody stopped you and said, can you tell me the second to last TikTok that you watched and what it was about? Most people couldn't tell you. And they'll watch hours
someone showing
and
their
hours of this
Minecraft
content.
world.
Why? Boredom.
Saying,
Boredom,
I stopped watching the
monotony,
tutorials.
which is truly painful, meaninglessness. I think people use pornography for really the same reason. Doom scrolling and the use of internet pornography are kind of the same too. It's the same kind of dopamine hit, the same kind of roulette feeling that you get flipping through TikTok or that you get looking through pornography. Sort of the same thing. I think a lot of people use pornography maybe because they're bored. I think the same is also true of all drugs, whether it's fentanyl or even marijuana. It's the same thing. Everybody is chasing. Everybody feels a sort of hollowness, lack of something. As far as what is the most dangerous, I mean, of course, fentanyl is the most
Casual
deadly.
goon sesh with
I
my
would say that the
homies,
most
true.
poisonous, however, would be OnlyFans. Because what OnlyFans does to the men that use it and the women that are involved in it, that are creating it, is it takes away their innocence, their soul. And if the solution to many of these problems of modernity is to rediscover each other, relationships with each other, a meaningful relationship with a wife, a husband,
I
a
didn't
meaningful
pause.
relationship
The fuck? Dude,
with
stop.
God. OnlyFans is really the only thing that might permanently sever that relationship by debasing and degrading and humiliating people, because that's really what that is. And maybe taking away what makes love and sex special between human beings, what connects, how that connects us to each other. So I think that maybe OnlyFans is the most insidious because it's the most damaging to the soul in a way that TikTok and fentanyl are not.
What's the biggest moral challenge facing young men today?
I would say when you look at the young men, it's such a sad state of affairs.
I'm so glad we get to dig more into the porn question. Yeah, true.
Amorality, meaning that people don't look at the world through a moral lens. if they have one, it's some vague idea that the only sin is to hurt another person in like a direct way. So there's this idea, as long as you aren't hurting anybody, it's fine. And so people will act like complete hedonists and degenerates with drugs, with sex. They steal. They don't have any kind of sense of obligation or responsibility. And I guess maybe that's the biggest moral failing by itself. You know, there's that famous line, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is convincing the world he doesn't exist. And it's this idea that
Harbaugh is
there
pro-white
is no
porn.
evil.
I'm supporting
there is
him
no
now.
such thing
Yeah,
as
true.
right and wrong.
I'm
And
out.
I think
No
maybe that's the
porn?
primary
Fuck this.
problem. Because if you think that, if you go through life thinking that as long as I'm not hurting anybody else, I can smoke weed all day, and I could be kind of a burnout, and I could go and
He's
hook
talking
up
about-
with
he's talking
no
about beta. He's talking about
consequences and be a
beta.
degenerate.
He's
Well,
talking
then
about
people
beta.
are going to feel complete license to do that, whatever the variety of that sin is going to be. So I think that people need to, in particular young men, they need to start to listen to their conscience and really be guided
Oh, shit.
by, I think, what we all know is right and wrong. You know, when we do these various things, we don't feel good about it, actually.
It isn't a sin. Yeah,
I don't think
tell him.
anybody
Tell him.
smokes a bunch of weed
True.
and lives
True.
that
Go
lifestyle
off.
and really feels good about it deep down. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
or,
How would
or a
you
very
know that?
sexually promiscuous lifestyle. I don't think anyone really feels good about that. So I think that the young men have to start to listen to their conscience and return back to our church, which is the Christian church.
On the flip side, what's something about Gen Z
The
you
Christian
genuinely
church
admire?
mentioned?
I think that Generation Z there is a sense of a
Weed is
social
medical.
consciousness that the boomers did not have. And even if it's misguided, there's still something redeeming about it.
I
So
only ever
take,
felt
for
that when I
example,
was
Greta
sipping wine.
Thunberg. She gets
Facts.
clowned on by the right
Facts.
because she's a bleeding heart liberal. You know, she says, how dare you? How absolutely dare you? But she is somebody who
How
is
long are
thinking
each of these?
globally and socially. What about
We're
the climate?
We're
What
50
about
minutes in. At least like
posterity?
an hour long.
Will our children and grandchildren have ecology? Will they have a clean and beautiful environment? Are the resources we're harvesting sustainable? They have this forward-thinking social global consciousness about that, even about race issues.
They're an hour,
And
36 minutes. Oh,
everyone
Clav was
knows
on
where I
it
stand
first.
on
Oh,
race.
and Myron.
But even, bleeding heart
Ah.
liberals as far as race goes, there is this concern for how we're going to get along as a society that I think that the boomers didn't have. I think that the Gen Xers, the baby boomers, less so the millennials, they're a very selfish generation. You know, you hear about boomers that are going to
Facts.
die, and they say they're not going to leave any inheritance to their children. They say, I got kicked out at 18, so my kids can figure it out. It's like, is it really all about you? You want to either blow
They
all
didn't
your
even,
money,
too. They're like
or
lying.
even if you don't, you're not going to give your kid an inheritance. There are also people that really had no civic engagement either. You know, 80s and 90s were a big party, was a great time. Meanwhile, the country was becoming very corrupt. There was a lot of apathy about politics. So I think that's maybe the one redeeming thing about Gen Z is they really are a socially conscious generation. They're like anything else. There's a virtue in that, even if it's misguided.
Why do you think Gen Z women are obsessed with astrology?
Because it's
Oh,
real.
man. I don't know. I mean, I'm the wrong guy to ask about women because I don't really talk to women.
Right.
But the astrology thing,
Right.
to me, people
Right.
are not taking it seriously enough because first of all, astrology is real.
Dude, I'm
If you're a
always giving
Catholic,
him
if you're a
astrology
Christian,
readings. Like,
This is actually
he
part of our
never-
tradition. Astrology is
he
all
never
over
reacts
the
to
Bible.
that part. Like, he
And
always
the
ignores
reason
that
as
part.
Catholics
But I'm always
we can't
telling him,
engage in
like,
astrology is because
dude,
there's
this is
something
happening
real
because of
about it.
this.
And to engage in it is to attempt to thwart God's plan.
Right.
It's to sort of say that we are masters of fate, and if we can learn the secrets of the universe, we can control our destiny when God controls our destiny.
I'll like
and that's
say
why
a
we
long
appeal to
message. I'll
God.
throw
So
astrology
astrology
into it,
is
and
real.
then
And
he'll respond to the
going by
rest,
another
but not
word,
that
you
part.
can call this witchcraft, paganism, and going back to the conversation about modernity, people know that atheism is false. And so what we're getting is not really a society without God. It's just a society with different gods. And so now there's a new age upon us where there is interest in the supernatural. There is interest in higher powers and maybe invisible forces, but without the guidance of the church.
Mercury's
because the
hiding, that's why
church
my
is out of
Wi-Fi doesn't
fashion.
work?
Now
That's
people are
literally
looking everywhere
true.
else, and they're looking into
That's literally, dude, when Mercury
ideologies,
retrogrades, tech breaks. That's
Gnosticism,
true.
witchcraft, paganism. They're looking into their
Literally.
tribal gods. You know, many of the white nationalists are really getting into like Apollo and Zeus. And on the other side, on the left, they're getting into
Zeus.
witchcraft. And I think
Hail
it
Apollo.
needs to be basically eradicated from society. I think it's very evil.
Base.
Numerology is real as well?
I do.
Really?
I do.
Dude,
It's
I'm
very
always
I've
giving him
looked into.
those too.
It's really fascinating. It feels like one of the people's thing with astrology and numerology manifestation is that like, oh, it's also general. Like it's not actually real. But like when I look into it, I don't know. I see some very specific similarities that make it feel real. And I'm Christian as
true.
well, so I know that it. I won't ask you this, but just my
Hail
personal
Odin.
belief is like, I do think that there's something there that if you do it in a way that it's aligned with God, it's probably okay. But do you not see it as aligned with God in general?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Jesus didn't do it, so it's like
exactly right.
Do you think women should have fewer rights than men?
ChatGPT, find instances
generally
where
speaking,
Jesus
yes.
maybe did numerology.
And I don't really love the rights. Rights is a very modern concept, and I think it's ideological. So I believe in human rights. I think everybody should have human rights, which is to say we should be able to
Fucking
speak our
woke.
minds. We should have the freedom of conscience.
Okay, so we're just liberal.
Have rights to not be
Okay.
abused by the government. We
So
have
he's
right to a
anti-slavery
trial,
now?
You know, a
Fuck
hearing with the jury of our peers. Like
Then piece it.
to me, these are all
Think
fine
you know
and
a
well,
guy.
but typically people are starting to conflate that with the privileges of influence in a democratic society. So voting rights is the big one. We have a right to vote. Now, this is treated like an absolute, but why? Does it really make sense that everyone has an absolute right to vote? Do children? Does a 5-year-old have a right to vote? You'd say, well, obviously not. Well, why? Because a 5-year-old doesn't know enough? Because they're not rational? Because they're not developed? Oh, okay, so it's not completely
okay,
absolute.
so
we have
he
to
is
draw
a
some
fucking
lines.
fascist.
What about somebody that has mental
Sorry.
problems? That person should, like
Sorry,
a schizophrenic person,
Trolling.
have a vote? Probably not. Maybe not. I would go further than that. When you look at the founders and the framers of the Constitution, there was only one office that was directly elected by anybody, and that was the House of Representatives. The president was chosen by electors, and the electors actually made the decision. It wasn't a vote. The Senate was chosen by the state legislatures. So out of all the federal government, the Supreme Court, the president, the Senate, only the House was actually elected by voters. And who voted? Well, it was landowning, propertied white men. Now, I don't know that I would go back to that, but the idea of it is that we don't want to actually have mob rule. We don't want to live in a society where it is just subjected to the
Nick is looping. I've heard him make all these points 100 times. He's not looping,
because
goofball.
if that happens, society might
talking
change
to
too
you.
rapidly. Society
He's
might
on
be
a new
given
show.
to the mood of the moment and do something rash.
Is that a troll? Are
undermine the
you a
freedoms of
troll?
society. And so when you look
Nick
at
is
something
looping.
like
I've heard him
voting
make
rights,
all
I
these
don't-
points
I
100
don't have-
times. He's on a
let's
new
say,
platform.
husband and wife to be voting against each other in an election. I think that kind of gets away from the society we want to have. Generally speaking, though, I do think that women should have rights in general.
What?
Yeah, the word rights is very weird
Wait,
because
he
it's,
does or
from
doesn't?
a Christian perspective, it's like, oh, you have the right to have an abortion, and Christians see that as murder. So it's like you have
Right.
the right to murder. I don't know. It's like not all
He
rights are
is
good for you
fucking
necessarily.
woke.
And there's also the whole thing about, I think you had to serve in the military. Originally, that was like the original reason for a vote. Maybe not in America, but in other countries. Is that the case?
Yeah, so well, because and a lot of it, there's like a deep conversation about that, but the idea is if you're going to be conscripted to fight in a regular army, in a standing army, then you should have a say over what your government does. That's a big reason why they lowered the voting age to 18, because if you could be drafted, you should be able to vote. But we just now have this universal suffrage. I think it's a horrible situation.
Nick, why do you think dating women is gay?
Well,
women
here's what I think
are
is gay.
fucking annoying.
It is gay to date women. Here's what's gay about it. What's gay about it is that, when I think about relations between men and women, It's about sex. All of my views about men and women come down to the biological imperative, which is that when a man and woman reach the age of sexual maturity, they want to have sex. According to Catholic sexual morality,
Okay, now he's a
the
pedophile.
only way to have sex is within marriage. That's what makes it moral. Because to have sex is to have kids, unless there's something wrong with you. To have sex is to have kids. Kids need a mother and a father that are going to stick together. So the way that you build
I'm
a stable
adding more
society
emotes.
is
I'm
to
adding
say
more
the
emotes.
mother and the father are going to have to be together
I'm adding
before they have kids and
sub-emotes.
have sex. They're going to have to be made one flesh. They're going to have to, that's their obligation to their children. That's their obligation to God. And so my view of sex and in the United States is
New
people should be
sub-emo drop.
getting married
Wait,
younger.
another one?
Because what they're doing now is they're going out and they're having a lot of hookups or having a lot of casual sex, which I don't think anybody's really, in the end, deeply satisfied with this arrangement. So people reach the age of sexual maturity. They want to have sex. They go out and have lots of sex. And they wait maybe 5, 10, 15 years. They wait until they're in their mid-20s, late 20s, 30s, before when the women are past their prime in looks, they wait for
New
men
Apollo
to
emo?
really have all their ducks in a row. Then finally, now we want
I
to have
wasn't
kids.
listening. What did he say?
And what happens? Well, at that point, the women aren't particularly fertile. Maybe they're only going to have a couple of kids. And also at that point, maybe both of them have had a lot of sexual partners and they've become maybe bitter, cynical, set in their ways. They haven't grown together. It makes it less likely they'll stay together. This is a very dysfunctional situation. And so my prescription for men and women is get married a lot younger when they reach that biological age of maturity. And then they're supposed to have kids. Then when the men and women are young and energetic, that's when they're having a big family and they can take care of a big family because they have energy. And then they grow together. They mature and grow into adults together. And they're more likely to stay together. The reason that dating is gay is because it's sterile. There's something very sterile about dating. Men are using condoms. What's gayer than using a condom? You know, preventing your virile seed from impregnating a woman, not to sound graphic, but like, that's very gay.
Dude,
it's gay for a woman to be on birth control and like denying the creation of life.
Dude, clip that, clip that.
For men and women to be not married,
Virile
but texting each
seed?
other all day.
You really just said...
And watching Disney movies and cuddling together and,
true,
you know, playing this sort of game throughout college and then into early adulthood. Will they or won't they? Am I going to get married? Maybe. Maybe we'll live together. I think the whole thing is just deeply unserious and just very kind of juvenile and immature. And I think that it kind of reflects like a arrested development.
And the mobile
it's like a stunted
phone.
Growth and
Keep everyone
maturity.
in the moment.
So I think, you know, I'm not saying that getting married to a woman's gay. I'm saying that all of this nonsense that surrounds modern dating culture is extremely sterile and unserious and very feminine and very gay.
Nick, do you think people would value your opinions on the nuclear family more if you'd consider starting one?
Total. Yes, they would. Yes, they would. But it's not even the nuclear family. To me, it's just like the family. But yeah, and I get that all the time.
Follow-up
That's why
to that?
I say,
Yeah,
you know,
crazy.
take it with a grain of salt because I'm a single guy. But I think, though, it actually makes me maybe more objective. Hear me out, because a lot of people say, well, you're not married and this, and that's true. But what you tend to find, and I see this all the time, is the married guys or guys with a long-term girlfriend, they're afraid of their woman. And so they know when they go on the podcast, they're looking at themselves through their girlfriend's eyes. And that's why they go and they say things like, a real man makes his wife happy. And it's like, okay, she wanted you to say
100%.
that, you know, so I'm free. I don't, you know, I can say things that offend women because I don't have to go back to my wife with her hands on her hip.
But I'm
like,
not a
what
pussy.
did you just say on your show?
So I just say,
so maybe it makes me a little more objective.
Yeah, didn't Tucker say, like,
annoying.
happy wife, happy life was a very good philosophy to live by?
And
he said it
texting.
unironically. I couldn't believe it.
Do you think his wife was happy to hear that?
Oh, yeah, she gave him head pats for that. She loved that.
Nick, what's the strangest DM or email you've ever received?
For women in fucking work camps.
Oh, I've got a lot. There's a lot
Beat
of crazy
them with
stuff.
rods or something.
I get the weirdest stuff I get is like political manifestos. There's a lot of crazy people in this country. People underestimate that. And when you become famous, especially in politics, the craziest people in the world all think you're the captive audience. And so I get like packets of political manifestos, people talking about taking over the government and, all kinds of crazy stuff. I would say that's maybe the most deranged.
He doesn't like it when I send him those?
Like
What the
schizophrenic
fuck?
people, and they think they know me in real life. They think that we're like, I don't even want to say specific details. Some people think they're in a relationship with me and we're like getting married. And I'm like, I have no idea
Anna
who you
Perez
are.
mentioned?
So there's a lot of weird people out there.
Yeah, I'm guessing you might have some stories that you haven't shared online because you don't want to encourage it. But,
Yes.
Nick, who are your top 5 favorite artists?
Well, I'm not a very artistic person. I wish I was more artistically inclined, but Ye has got to be
Didn't
my
like
number
my
one.
manifesto?
Best music, best fashion, best
It
everything.
completes me. Yeah,
And
me
then
too.
musical artists
married.
only.
We can do
Me
music.
and Nick are getting
If
married
you want to
later
mention a
this
certain
year.
Austrian painter.
My favorite visual artist. I don't know. I mean, I'm not into the visual arts. I mean, I guess I would say Ye would be number one. The music's always it's a question that invites a lot of judgment because you want to sound cool. It's like if you have a bad playlist, people are like, you're corny.
Do you listen to like Bach or
No.
that kind of classical music? No.
No.
80s synth, anything like that?
No.
Oh
my
That's all
Cole.
LARP. That's
Oh my
LARP.
horrible.
I listen to a lot of Indian
Horrible.
alternative.
What is
I
that
like,
question, bro?
what is it? Vacations. You know them?
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
And who's the other one? Always. Indie group.
Robbie, you know that one? Yeah,
No,
he's big into the indie music.
Yeah. Is that a girl or is that a band? I think it's a group. They're great.
Yeah.
I think they're like Scandinavian. Always, Vacations. Provoker is
call
one
Nick
of my
gay for
favorites.
this,
They're kind
dude.
of
They
like
call
a
him gay for
goth,
everything.
like little
Who cares?
darker indie. But I like all kinds of stuff. I mean, I had a radio show in high school.
Yeah.
And so I was always a music lover. I really love R&B, the classics like Marvin Gaye and Teddy Pendergrass and the Temptations, Earth, Wind and Fire, stuff like that. I like a lot of the classic rock also. But I really have a big discography on my.
But Ye is the only like rap artist you would say?
Imagine he said
well, I
Imagine
like a lot of
Dragons.
the 90s stuff.
What's your favorite
Yeah,
music? I
Wu-Tang
gotta
Clan
say,
and Nas. I don't like really anything after like.
I say
2005.
Imagine Dragons.
No, I hate Eminem.
2022.
His music.
Yeah.
Ever hear
Interesting.
Demons?
So Nick, give me one word to describe these people.
Ever hear Demons
Kamala
by
Harris.
Coconut. That was genius when she said that. I love that.
JD Vance.
Fat.
Candace.
Dumb.
Black? Oh, yeah.
Andrew Tate.
Based.
Ye.
Genius.
Ben Shapiro.
Jew.
Cookie King.
Jew.
Sub 5. No, I can't do that to him.
That's crazy.
I can't. Chat. He's a chat.
Vladimir Putin.
Wise.
Xi Jinping.
Wise.
Caesar.
Goat.
Bibi Netanyahu.
Evil.
Donald Trump.
Narcissist.
Anyone else we missed? That'd be a good one.
No, those are the big ones. That's a good list.
Did you buy Trump coin?
No. Did you?
Yeah, I actually made some good money on that, but I think I ended up losing a bit in the end. I was curious, this is very random, but from a game theory political view, like, was that a good move for him to, I don't know, rug America? Like, do you think it made Gen Z happy? Like,
That was
do you think people were like,
awesome.
he's
I
based,
loved
like the
that.
boomers didn't care? Like, what did you think of that whole
Yeah, I
thing?
don't
Because
think
no
they
one really
cared, to
talks
be
about the
fair.
fact that Trump made like what, $8 billion off of.
Yeah, that's most of his net worth. Is Trump coin.
Yeah.
Which is well, it's emblematic of what he is, which is vaporware. And there's something funny about that because when Trump ran in
True.
2016,
That's true.
the internet subculture that surrounded his
Vaporwave.
campaign was Vaporwave.
That's true.
And it was
That's so
Macintosh
true.
Plus, the song, which the
It's
genre
all in your
was
head.
all those 80s
It's all in
songs,
your
chopped
head.
and screwed, slowed down, distorted.
It's all
And
in
they
your
called it
head.
Vaporwave because it resembles vaporware, which is these like 80s
Jeez.
late stage capitalist products
It's
that were
all in
advertised
your
and seemed
head.
great, but never
Bow,
materialized.
bow, bow.
And it's so interesting because in 16,
That's so
vaporwave
true.
was
That's
the
fucked
aesthetic.
up.
It was
That's
the
so
grid,
true.
the sun, the synth wave, like you talked about. That all of that was
is
called
meme magic.
vaporwave. And what Trump
Meme magic,
obviously
we just didn't know what to
represented
make
that
of
because
it.
he was of the 80s. He was from the 80s. He's sort of like a old school billionaire from when New York was the center of the world, representing Wall Street and maybe even more than Wall Street, building things, brick and mortar. And what Trump turned out to be is the ultimate vaporware. This promise of a return to the 80s that never materialized. And so there's like a very deep, something very deep philosophically about the whole thing. And then when Trump coin came around, it's like that is the best example of it. Is he a billionaire or is he a scam artist? If his net worth is all built on a crypto rug pull that like Howard Lutnick devised or something like that, then he's kind of a fake. And at the end of the day, nobody cared. So maybe it was worth it for him.
True.
Maybe that's just a law of the jungle. You do as much as you
Rick
can
and
get away
Morty
with.
mentioned.
Yeah, I am fascinated by how little that is talked about.
That's
still.
a really
But, Nick, what was
That's actually an
the last
insane.
good year in America?
That's like an insane thought and point I've never thought of. I
Oh, that's
don't
a
think
difficult
anyone
question.
has ever
I would say
made that connection that he just
maybe
did. That's insane. That's,
times
like,
were pretty
real.
good when I was growing up. A lot of people might set it way back in the past or decades in the past. I still believe that America was a great country up until very recently. I would argue maybe 2007 or 2008, maybe before Obama got elected and the recession. I think that was probably the last great year.
That's when the iPhone became popular too, and everyone was getting iPods. But how about from like a policy point of view?
From a policy point of view, maybe 2000. And here's why. You have to look at the 20th century in this way. You have these major wars in Europe, which is really one war. You have the rise of Germany, which is what creates World War I, World War II. And the United States rises to the occasion and becomes a superpower. But then we're locked in this contest with the Soviet Union. And basically the United States doesn't know the end
new
of
sub
war
emote
for
inbound?
70 years.
Yo, try the new sub
Because we
emote.
get involved in
Viking.
World War I. Right away, we're in World War II. Then we're fighting on every continent in the Cold War. And what happens in 91 on Christmas is the Soviet Union collapses. And with it, literally the only other world power, the only other great power in the world. Europe is hollowed out. China has not yet begun its rise. Japan arguably had a competitive economy, but no military or anything. And so in 1991, you have what they now call the unipolar moment, which is that the United States enjoys more relative power, a bigger advantage over every other country put together than maybe any country has in history. No other country has had that kind of preeminence. And we made some mistakes in the 1990s. Maybe we were a little too aggressive in Yugoslavia, and there were some other mistakes. We didn't catch the World Trade Center bombing and some other things. But times were pretty good in the 1990s. I think people remember that as a time when we had the luxury of not caring about politics, actually. But what happens after 9/11 is that we begin to squander that advantage. Rather than take the peace dividend, which is we don't have to fight the Soviet Union. We don't have to build a giant nuclear arsenal. We don't have to have a giant military anymore. Rather than take this peace dividend and invest it into America, reinvest in our people, in our infrastructure, in our industry, we start to do the opposite. And so we go to war in Afghanistan. Then we go to war in Iraq. Hundreds of thousands of troops in the Middle East with a dozen strategic objectives. We're going to topple Saddam. Then we're going to build a democracy. Then we're going to do... At the same time, we bring China into the World Trade Organization, literally right around that same time. I think it was the year 2000. And we start to send all the factories over to China. A few years after NAFTA, we start to send all the factories to Mexico and Canada.
Okay, numerologist
so
Pepe.
This is the most
sub-emotes?
heartbreaking thing in world history. We won. We won World War I, World War II, World War III with the Soviet Union. How many people died on the shores of Normandy? How many people died in the jungles of Vietnam? Fought so hard, sacrificed so much, stood up in the most paranoid time, Cuban Missile Crisis. We came out victorious. And rather than enjoy the spoils of the war and guarantee a 1,000-year American empire, we blew it. We gave it to China. We just gave it to them. We gave it to Mexico. We gave it to Israel. And what inevitably happens 15 years later is Russia starts to rebuild. China, the 1 billion man empire. And, by the way, it's an anomaly of history that China was so inferior compared to the West for the last 500 years. It was inevitable that China would come back in a big way. Now that we blew our advantage, now we find ourselves desperate, scrambling, trying to rebuild our country fast enough to prevent China from invading Taiwan. And it's a big question mark. There's a lot of uncertainty if we'll even be a country in 50 years.
All right, I gotta pee real quick. I'll be right back.
You go from having more power, relative power, than any civilization in history, winning a century of nuclear war, only to blow it, and then maybe lose 20 years later. That was the worst policy mistake of all time.
So you'd pinpoint it to 2001?
2001.
I'm a bit surprised at your answer. I thought you might be inclined to say around the assassination of JFK, the formation of the CIA, kind of the beginning of removing God from the US. Why do you kind of prefer 2001 over that time period? Because I would guess that your key issue that you see is godlessness. Is that right?
I mean, to me, that's more of a global problem.
Okay.
Because it wasn't really, this is truly a symptom of modernity. I think because of technological innovation, because of abundance and prosperity, it goes hand in hand. Every time there is an increase in the quality of life, I think people apostatize, people lose the faith. Because it's easier to have faith when you're poor and miserable than when you're rich and happy, when your belly's full, because it's easier to distract yourself and there's less of an urgent need to explain suffering or meaninglessness. So to me, I don't really diagnose that as a specifically American problem. And here's the other thing. America had an opportunity to be reborn, you could say, in that moment. America had the opportunity. That was a true inflection point where history was not, let's say, predetermined. We could have gone anywhere from there. After the 1990s, you really could have had a moment where the country became stronger and fortified itself. And maybe we could have fixed those problems even after 9/11. Look at the approval rating of George W. Bush after 9/11. It was 94%, higher than any president in history. Patriotism, togetherness was at an all-time high. You could even argue that after 9/11, we could have come together and be reborn as a country. But instead, we doubled down on all of our worst impulses: more surveillance, more war, more suspicion, more corruption, more lies about Iraq, more opportunism. So I think that was really the mistake where we might have lost it forever.
What's the darkest part of history that Catholic schools don't teach you?
I can't speak to Catholic school, but because honestly, Catholic education is so poor. The Catholic catechism class. So I didn't go to a Catholic school, but you get catechized. You go to a separate thing once a week. And, I came out of that not knowing the difference between a Catholic and a Protestant. I mean, it's very poor in terms of religious education. But in terms of what is left out, there's this idea that the schools don't teach the dark stuff about our history. I feel like that's all we get. I feel like all we get is indoctrinated about America's sins and the sins of colonialism and the sins of slavery and the sins of racism. And that's kind of American history class. It's like slavery, then Holocaust, then racism, then we were Islamophobic after 9/11. Of course, there's a much deeper and, in my opinion, a better story about where we came from, where this civilization came from. They want to talk about Columbus. What did Columbus discover when he got here? Human sacrifice, cannibalism, barbarism. So they want to say Columbus committed a genocide. Well, first of all, that was mostly done by disease, which could not be helped, the Columbian Exchange. But second of all, they don't talk about
Dude, we
they have
killed
this
all
myth
of
of the
them.
noble savage. So we got here and everybody was hanging out, smoking tobacco, and we introduced violence to these societies. Or how about they talk about the Mexican cession, that America took all this land from Mexico. Read about the Comanches. Read about what the Comanches did to the Texans in the middle of the 19th century. They went into towns of Texan settlers and they skinned people. They boiled them alive. They set them on fire. I mean, this was savagery that was unheard of in European
Dude, the
civilization.
chat's just mocking
And I
each
think
other.
that the world order that emerges from
The
World
poor
War
natives are
II
just smoking
is
weed. Yeah, it's
objectively,
true.
arguably, the best, most peaceful, most humane world order that ever existed. And don't get me wrong, it's not to say that we've lived up to that. We're hypocrites, and any moral standard makes a hypocrite out of a person. But what emerges from that is the Atlantic Charter, international law.
You will
People
not
have human
mock
rights.
me.
People should have a say in their government. Women should have rights. Prisoners have rights. There are certain things in war that can never be justified, like chemical weapons or genocide. All of that comes out of the world wars of the European powers. Do you think that if China was the preeminent power, that we would have a society based on human rights? I don't think so. And I think the same would be true of the Muslims or the barbarians in Latin America, the indigenous people that were here, or anywhere else for that matter.
I guess if you could force every American to read one book, what would it be?
If I could force an American to read one book, I would force every American to read the biography of George Washington by Henry Cabot Lodge, because I think that people in America have no idea where we come from. And I think the biggest problem is there's such a lack of a sense of civic or personal responsibility. America was built by truly the finest men. People like George Washington, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton. These were bold, courageous, visionary, brilliant people. And that is what is required for self-government to work.
Right.
For us to have a republic, a democracy, a free society, you don't just get privileges.
Nationalism by Keith Woods. Yeah, important book.
Which is to say,
It's true.
America's not about being able to
Huge.
smoke weed
Very
and carry a
important.
gun and get gay married and, drive like a maniac. America is supposed to be about we can choose our own
Dude, all
destiny.
these chuds hating on
But
weed
in
all
order
the
to
time.
do that, we have to be prudent, we have to be
Makes me
virtuous,
sick.
we have to be hardworking, responsible, we have to be rightly guided. And those were the kinds of people that built this society, that fought for our independence, that fought for our right to self-determine, to determine our own course. And they were truly great men. They were the best among us. So for the lowest common denominator, it would be good for them to get inspired about where we came from and kind of what we need to be to keep what we have here.
This brings me to another point. Nick, you're a self-proclaimed racist or racialist. Do you think America should bring back
He's a
segregation?
self-proclaimed asshole.
No, but what I would say is that people should
I
have
didn't say
the
Mein
right
Kampf fucking cock
to live
through.
among their own people. And I think that sort of a loaded question, which is a fair question, but what we are undergoing right now is the greatest sociological experiment in world history, which is to say that we all know that in 1965, America was a 90% white country, 90% white, 10% black, and maybe a little bit in the middle that was Hispanic, Asian. People really don't understand that. It was 90% white and mostly Christian. And people can feel however they want about it. Now we're a 60% white country.
Dude, are they gonna?
And
is he gonna
in
call
10,
for
15 years, we're going to
segregation?
be a 50% white country. Now think about how much changes with that. These are people that came here largely through immigration. They speak different languages. They have different alphabets. They don't even use the same letters. They come from different continents. They have different religions, different customs, holidays, heroes. They have a different sense of humor. They have a different look. Everything about them is different. And we're basically being told that we have to accept this transformation. Your neighborhood that was one way, that was a Christian,
Do you guys like
white
the new
neighborhood,
emotes? Look.
is now going to be a 80% Indian neighborhood, or now it's going to be 80% Somali, or now it's going to be 80% Mexican, and now all the signs are going to be in Arabic, and now the mayoral candidate is going to be fighting with clan warfare with this other Somali people, and now you're going to be celebrating Diwali in your subdivision instead of Christmas, and people are starting to say, wait a second. This doesn't feel like America. America's apple pie and baseball and Merry Christmas and
turkey and
Marshall Fields.
pilgrims.
You know, we're in Chicago after all.
It's true.
People are saying, I don't like that this is happening in my neighborhood.
Can you
I
make
wanna
a
go
white
somewhere where
power
it feels
emo?
like
Yeah, good
America.
idea. Good idea.
But it turns out you can't do that. Because
And
if you
thought of
want to
that.
set up shop
I
in
didn't
a
upload these
neighborhood and
ones.
say, this is where it's going to be
know
white
if they'll be
people,
the right
and
size.
we're going to have our white culture and our Christian culture, that's called segregation. That's called white supremacy. That's called white nationalism. But I would say, how is it fair that you have entire neighborhoods called Little Haiti, Little Cuba, Little this, that, the other, and they set up an ethnic enclave and they make it very comfortable for themselves. They have their parades, they have their... But if white people want to go in our own country where our ancestors were at, not mine, but some people's ancestors were here at Jamestown, or they were here at, the Virginia colony. If they want to go and set up a neighborhood, they say, oh, that's racist. I think people should be able to choose to live among people they're with. I'm not a believer that, people need to drink out of a separate water fountain because they're racially inferior, but I believe that we should be able, as white people, to express our culture in our neighborhood the way that every other group of people seems to be able to now that we have a multiracial country.
So is there a policy that would ensure that? Or like, what would that look like logistically?
I think that first of all, you have to get rid of the Civil Rights Act, because the Civil Rights Act would say that you cannot voluntarily self-segregate in that way. It would make it illegal. So you have to overturn elements of that. And then the other thing is, there's a lot of backdoor policies that literally aim to break up white neighborhoods. Like the Obama administration had a policy at HHS where they said that if a neighborhood was not diverse enough, they would bring in Section 8 housing. They would say, if your neighborhood is more than 50% white, we're going to put Section 8 in your neighborhood. And what do you think Section 8 is going to attract? I mean, it's like a deliberate war to make sure that there are no white neighborhoods. And, it would be one thing if they were doing that to everybody, because at least you could argue that that's fair, but they're not. In Chicago, Little Village is all Hispanics, Pilsen's all Hispanics, Garfield Park is all blacks. But you go out to the suburbs where it's white people and it's nice, they want to bring in Section 8 and say, no, you can't all live together as white people. Well, so our options are what? We're going to live in the South Side, or we're going to live in Little Mexico? It's just, that's not right. So anyway, I think they should just play by the same rules and reverse some of those policies.
Do you think you'd feel differently about this if you were raised in Saudi Arabia?
How long is this?
As a white person or as an Arab?
An Arab, yeah.
Well, I mean, if the thing is, if you're coming from a different culture,
how fucking long is this?
That's sort of the point.
Right.
It's like you're not the same. And so somebody that's coming from, let's say, Saudi Arabia, why would I want to leave? If I'm
asking
Saudi,
anything now.
I live in a country with all Arabs and all Muslims. They don't even allow churches over there.
Oh my!
Because it's the Holy Land. It's the land of the Prophet. And the Hejaz, forget about it. In Mecca, Medina, you're never going to get a church. You're never going to get a synagogue.
You know what sticker I like?
Osama bin Laden, part of the fatwa is because we had a military base in the Holy Land in Saudi Arabia. And that's sort of the point, which is that if you're born in India, you're born in China, you have my sympathy. But if you're born in these other countries, that's your home. We're doing things the way we've done it for 3,000 years, since the Indus River Valley civilization. We have our Chinese culture, we have our Indian culture. We could always go home. But if you're born in America, you're told this country's for everybody.
Nick if he
your neighborhood is being changed. Well, that's the value of diversity. And it's like, well, you have a home, you have a home, you have a place to return to. Where's my home? My home is for everybody. My home is supposed to be here so everyone can have an opportunity and everybody can set up a homeless encampment. You know, white people
Mm.
in Europe and the United States are saying, well,
What?
what
Is
about
this
us? Do we
real?
get to have a country? Do we get to have a government, traditions? So in some ways, you would feel badly being born in these other countries because you're impoverished and there's inequality and things like that. But at the same time, you still have a sense of belonging,
Wait,
a
look at
sense
this
of
one.
home that white people increasingly don't have.
It is interesting how white people often face backlash for like going somewhere like Hawaii or going somewhere like we think like Indonesia, Bali, like Thailand areas. They're like, you're taking away the opportunities from them. You're spending all this money being lavish, but it's not the same on the reversal. So
Mhm.
do you think America should be a Christian nation?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
I think
Look at
that
this one. Oh, wait.
I
Look
don't
at
believe in a
this one.
theocracy. I don't think that the
Oh, wait.
church should run the
What?
government. And as Catholics, we're also against that in the modern era, at least. And because it wasn't like that before.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but I do believe that the legislators, the government, I think that it should be made up of all Christians, all
Not
professing
trad.
Christians, and people that are guided by Christianity. And the reason being is because how a society is governed reflects a form of morality. Why do we say
There's
you
a
can't kill?
tree. Okay,
As a
let's see. What's the
moral
chat saying while
virtue.
this is
Why do we
happening?
say you can't steal? You can't. That all reflects
This
morality.
guy has
That all reflects a
3.2
position
million
on
subscribers.
morality. And you go to other countries, for instance, and it's not the same. You know, in India, honor killing is a huge
Dude,
deal.
why is the chat dead?
If your daughter dishonors the family, they kill her. That's part of the culture. In the Muslim world, you have religious laws that oppress women. I think it goes, and for me, I think it goes too far. I think it's inhumane to tell women they have to wear a niqab everywhere. They have to cover themselves completely. The kind of abuse the women are treated with over there, but it reflects their morality, their
I
tradition,
love
their
the YouTube
religion,
emotes, dude. Look at
creates their
these.
culture, and ultimately their laws. And so when we look at the United States, we love the United States. We love the idea of human rights and equality and
Wait, watch
liberty
this,
and
watch
all
this,
these
watch
things.
this.
All these things come from a Christian morality. All these things come from a Christian civilization. When the United States was founded, I believe it was no fewer than 8 of the original colonies that had a state church. There was a church for that particular colony or that particular state. So people like to say, oh, well, you know, Thomas Jefferson was a deist. Everybody in the colonies was Christian. Almost all the colonies had their own churches. It was founded, framed, pioneered, built by Christians. And in fact, the
Let's see who's
civilization
gonna
that
work.
spawned America was Christian also. England, Spain, France, Italy,
It's not
all
bad.
the explorers
Actually not
and
bad.
colonists
Really
that
not
ever
bad.
set foot in America, they
Save
were
that
all
one.
Christians. So, you know, people think that things
Usually,
are going to
you
go
can
the
have it
way they
make
are
kind of
without
assets, then you just have to edit them a lot.
not
Make them
understanding that
work better.
Christianity is a fundamental pillar and how things got to be this good. So you take that away, it's like pulling a
These
leg
are
out from under
insane.
the table. The whole thing's going to collapse. So it's not a question of whether we should remain a Christian country.
So there's no policy that you would adjust to make sure that America's like a Christian nation, only the members of, not parliament, but Congress in the presidency are Christians. Like there's no policy changes you make.
I would make a policy change that you have to be Christian to be elected.
Do you think that kind of plays along the line of being meshing of church and state, though?
No, I don't think so.
It's a laughing emote. Yeah, you're right.
The Establishment Clause is really speaking about the church as an institution and saying that the church has this moral authority, the government has a civic authority. And it's a question of, is there a conflict of interest when the two institutions are merged? In other words, are the priests going to be magistrates? Are the pastors going to be, are they going to have a sort of civic authority over us? And what kind of corruption does that create? Does the state corrupt the church? Does the church? So I think as long as you separate the institutions and just say you have to proclaim Christ to be elected, I don't think there's a problem there.
Do you think AI is part of God's plan for humanity? Or do you think it's man playing God?
That's
perfect.
perfect.
The Catholic Church takes a position that technology is neutral. It's how you use it. So there's some Christian sects like the Amish, the Mennonites, who will say, well, technology is evil.
Try it.
But we believe that it could be used for good or for evil. And I think that all of it, everything that happens is part of God's plan. So it's happening, it's part of it. The concern is how our concept of AI might undermine our concept of what makes
We got
us
15
human.
minutes left of the show.
Because
this better end
what
soon.
makes
Come on,
us
please.
rational is that we have memory, will, and understanding. We possess that trinity of things. Our conception of the past is memory. We don't live in the past.
These
we have
ones aren't as
memories of it.
special as the
We
handmade
have a
ones that I
will,
make,
we
but
make decisions.
these
We
ones are like
guide our
fun
own
in
actions.
the moment.
And we have
on the
understanding
fly.
because you truly contemplate the meaning of things, of our sensory experiences. And that's what makes us rational as humans. AI doesn't have any of those things. It certainly has memory. It stores information, but does AI have will? Is it self-directed? Can it set itself in a direction and make a decision? I don't think so. Does it have understanding? Does it truly comprehend the things that it's saying, let's say for an LLM? No, it doesn't really understand. If you understand what an LLM is, it's prediction. It's a statistical model. And so I think what is called artificial intelligence is sort of a misnomer. It's really like an advanced calculator.
Upload.
And I think that maybe what will wind up happening is that in our
Dude, this
quest
is a good one. I'm not
for
gonna lie.
sentient AI or an artificial general intelligence is we'll find that whatever this is that we're creating is fundamentally distinct from the human self. And it might actually teach us something about who we are and what makes us distinct. So I think maybe the AI engineers, they might be in for a rude awakening when they realize that a genuine AI is literally impossible because it will never be ensouled or conscious in the way that a human being is.
Nick, tell me if I have this right. You regularly went to underground Latin mass during COVID. Is that true?
No.
No?
No.
It's AI hallucinating on me. But did you go to mass during COVID?
Grok made that shit up.
I did, yeah.
Got it. And how were they doing that? Was
Grok made that up?
Well, they made some, I think in the early days, they didn't have anything.
In 2020,
5 years
Nick
ago,
Fuentes
so I don't
went
really
to
remember. I think at some
trad
point,
underground Latin mass,
and everybody
was
wearing
a big
masks.
controversy. Pearson
and
was
the
there.
major change that they made is the sign of peace. So in the old days, when you did the sign of peace, you would shake hands with everybody. Peace be with you. And now you do like a wave. Peace be with you. Do a wave. And that's the only real major change. They did masks. They did that. But overall, it was basically the same.
Do you ever regret not becoming a priest?
No, I don't think I was up for that.
No?
No, because I wanted to be a priest when I was very young. I used to tell my mom I wanted to be a priest when I was like a little kid, which I forgot about. She told me about this. She's like, you always wanted to be a priest. But I don't think that I have the discipline for that, honestly. I think that that's a vocation. You're called to do that by God. And I, at a very early age, I wanted to do it, but I think that I'm a little too maybe undisciplined, eccentric to be able to live a life like that.
Because you're a smart guy and you're a moral guy. You definitely try to hold yourself from vices, but like it seems as though you kind of put yourself in the situation where
what? Dude, look at that.
You kind of have to say inflammatory things that might not be
That's good.
morally
That's
aligned
good.
with you. Maybe they are.
Try again.
But
another one.
Something like being a priest or being a monk might align with you more. I don't know. I'm just thinking about this.
That's an interesting.
Dude, let's wrap this up.
Thought.
Because
these questions
suck.
I mean,
come on.
When you're in politics, you're in the world. You're dealing with the practical reality of power and flesh and human beings, and so it's like anything. You engage with it, and it's like the abyss. You stare into the abyss, and it stares back into you. And in a sense, there's something maybe. As a priest, you're insulated from these things. When you're in the monastery, you don't have to think about things in a practical way. You don't have to think about those sorts of things because you're focused on the moral law and you're living in a sort of moral bubble, essentially.
Right.
Dude, that one's
not
not
to say
good.
that priests don't sin. Of course, tons of that going on, obviously. But I guess I would consider myself, my vocation is I'm more of a warrior. You know, there's this idea of like you're a priest or a warrior. As somebody that's a true fighter, I think I just have the spirit that is driven to
I don't know if these will
compete and fight and especially fight for justice in the world. And I don't think it's even possible to act in a completely priest-like way when you're doing that. I try to do that, but I think it's easier said than done.
If you had 5 minutes with Jesus Christ, what would you say to him?
What?
No, that's a big question.
Wow.
Well, I would ask for forgiveness. I would ask for a pardon, certainly. But I would ask about the secrets of the universe. I would want to know, I would want him to tell me the whole plan. He'd probably have a better idea of what to say to me than I would have a question to ask him. But I guess maybe more than anything, I would just beg for a pardon. I would beg for mercy and forgiveness. But I don't know that I would ask him any kind of theological question. I would be a much more humble approach. If I could ask an historical figure, I'd have tons of questions, but someone like you're talking to God, it would be more like, please don't send me to hell.
Is weed a sin?
What do your prayers look like?
Is Veda going to hell?
Mostly I pray before I eat. I pray when I'm in danger. I pray when I drove here, because I had to drive through the ghetto to get here. I had to get off at Independence Boulevard to get here, so I was praying then. But mostly I just pray to set my intentions in alignment with God's, because I think a lot about prayer. And when people think about prayer, they think about petition. They pray for
Probably
something.
Probably a necromancer.
God,
Where does it say the necromancers go to hell? Rasu.
Protect me from this. Give
Where in the
me
Bible
this.
does it say necromancy sends you to hell?
I always thought about that. Is it that we didn't pray to God enough? That we don't live forever? That our family members die? That bad things happen to us? Because I don't think anybody prays. People say, please save my sick parents. Please, I don't want to get hurt. And then people die all the time. So you say to yourself, did they not pray enough? Did the prayers not work? And I think that the real object of prayer is more a presence, being in the presence of God and allowing maybe God to work on you, maybe opening your intentions and your will, sort of inviting God in and letting God guide your actions. It's really more about, people think about it in terms of God help me in my life. It's more like God guide my life. Use me for your
And Magi
purpose.
are in the Bible.
That makes
they're
sense.
following
Sort of
the sign of the Lord.
the
Yeah,
table
it's true.
in a different way. And so I sort of think about it that way, more like, let me say the right words to do your will. Let me do the right things to do your will. Give me more faith. Help me kind of develop as a person. Protect me from
Exodus,
temptation.
that's Old
It's usually
Testament,
things like
Karasu,
that.
you
Do you
fucking
have a
Jew.
journal that you write down your thoughts in?
I do not.
No? Do you think there's any significance to dreams?
I do. I'm a huge believer in dreams.
That's Torah. Karasu.
Have you ever had a dream that later became
Karasu
true?
just cited
Yes.
the Torah. Can we just talk about this?
Yes, and it was disturbing.
You just
I had a
mentioned the law of
dream
Moses.
in August of 2019, and it was so vivid that I talked about it on my live stream. And I said, I had a dream last night that I was at a Charlie Kirk event, a Turning Point USA event. And maybe I'm not going to tell it perfectly, it was a long time ago, but I said it, and years later, somebody pulled the clip. And I said, in the dream, my followers were asking Charlie questions and pressing him.
Genesis
and
is
they
in
were
the
being
Old
thrown out of the
Testament
event.
too. Yeah.
And then a month
But
later,
it's not the law of Moses.
at
overturned.
Charlie Kirk's Culture War tour in Colorado, 2 of my followers went up and pressed him about the Israel lobby and about legal immigration. And it started the Groyper War, which was my followers followed him to every one of his events and asked him these questions, and they were being thrown out. And it became such a huge story. Eventually, Don Jr. was asked these questions at UCLA, and it became a national story and really put my career on the map. And when that happened, I had totally forgotten about that dream. I'd never made the connection. But like I said, about 2 or 3 years later, somebody went back and found that
Charlie
clip
Kirk
and
visited
said,
him in a
2
dream.
months before any of this
Holy.
happened, you dreamt it. And I talked about it on the show because it was that, it affected me that much. So I'll never forget that. That was a very weird coincidence.
Does that happen a lot?
I am Charlie
No,
Kirk.
I think it was only that one time.
Yeah. Because I remember Candace mentioning some text messages about Charlie's dreams, maybe him knowing that
Dude,
he was
can they
going to
wrap
die.
this up,
I
please?
think someone said that those messages were fake. I'm unsure. But I guess if you had 5 minutes
With Charlie Kirk, what would you say?
what might you ask him?
I really have
Guide
no
me.
interest in discussing with Charlie Kirk. You know, Charlie has become sort of a martyr now, and of course, I don't believe he deserved to die. I wish he was still alive.
Charlie,
That
guide
being
me.
said, people forget, what was Charlie Kirk's business? He made $140 million per year at Turning Point USA. $140 million per year for a campus organization. You don't make that kind of money unless you are really taking money from everybody. Everybody will give it to you. Billionaires, Silicon Valley, special interests, India, I mean, you name it. They were taking money from everybody. And there's this debate about what Charlie Kirk's real views really were about Israel, for example. And the pro-Israel people say Charlie was with us until he died. The anti-Israel people say, no, he was changing his mind. Now, how can both of these things be true? Because Charlie would tell people what they wanted to hear. He was everything to everybody. And so to the pro-Israel
cooking
crowd,
Charlie
he was
Kirk. Let's
pro-Israel
go.
until September 10th. To the
But what about
anti-Israel
weird
crowd,
Charlie
if he had been
Kirk?
alive for a couple more months, he would have really stuck it to them. And I think at the bottom, he didn't really have many real convictions. Other than that, I do believe he was a sincere Christian. And for that, I respect him. I do believe that he was pro-America, and so I respect him for that. Outside of it, we had a very intense and vicious feud because he was entrenched in politics, and I was the congenital outsider. So I really wouldn't have much to say to him, to tell you the truth.
I have to know, what do you think about Erica Kirk?
Well,
Sexy.
I got a lot of flack for this.
Yeah.
Sexy
I
square head.
criticized Erica Kirk. But look, here's the thing about Erica. Nobody wants to say anything about Erica Kirk because she's a grieving widow. And so that's just decency. Nobody wants to attack a young woman who lost her husband to a vicious public execution and now has 2 fatherless children.
The pyrotechnics
That
were in
being
bad
said,
taste.
Nobody would be saying anything if she went home and grieved. But she didn't do that. She immediately assumed control of Turning Point USA, which already was one of the most influential, powerful, conservative nonprofits and for-profit entities in the conservative movement, and which became far more powerful after Charlie died because of his apparent martyrdom. So, within 72 hours, she becomes Charlie's successor. And now she's in Washington, D.C., it seems, all the time, with J.D. Vance, with Donald Trump, with all these other powerful people. Now, I'm going to tell you what I don't like. I don't like when people take tragedy or a sob story or something that's emotionally impactful and they use it as cover so you can't ask questions or criticize. And I feel like that's
What
is
other events
happening
are
here.
like that? What other
Like I said,
events?
if she were a widow
Name a few.
grieving, no one should or
you
could
wanna ask
say
questions.
anything about her. It would be out of line. But we're not talking about Erica Kirk, the grieving widow. We're talking about Erica Kirk, the president of Turning Point USA and close personal friend of J.D. Vance, heir apparent of MAGA. We can't ask questions about who this person is. We can't criticize or be skeptical of who she
What's
is
she getting at?
because she cries. See, that I feel is manipulative, and that I don't like. So when people start to
Can
tell
I go
me
like this? Can I like make
for
this?
emotional or moral reasons you can't
Those don't
ask that
pop out.
question, that's when I get even more suspicious. So Erica Kirk, I don't know her, and that's sort of the thing. Who really is she? I don't think anybody knows, actually.
Not to force you to give a take on it without evidence, but what do you think could be happening with her?
What I think, without knowing her or knowing Charlie personally for that matter, I get the impression that their marriage was political. I think it was arranged. And this happens in elite circles. Charlie was an ambitious and increasingly very powerful, very young man. Erica, from what I'm told, it was her desire to marry political royalty. She's one of these people. I don't know who her parents are, but she's since been seen in music videos and reality shows. She was trying to make a name for herself. And so you tend to find that among people who are rich and famous or influential, they don't meet their wife at a coffee shop or on a dating app. They get set up. by other people. This powerful man needs a wife.
Oh,
This
that
young lady
basement.
wants to marry a powerful man. They get set up. And I get the sense, and I've heard a rumor, that that was something like an arranged marriage. Now, that doesn't
at
mean
me.
there's inherently anything sinister going on there. And maybe they grew to love each other eventually, but it does speak to the fact that, maybe everything about Charlie Kirk's life was a fabrication. Candace Owens said it's like the Truman Show. It was a created world. Now, what Candace gets wrong is she thinks Charlie was a victim. I think he knew full well. He gave himself fully to the political grift, and that comes with it. Fake talking points, fake friends, fake patrons, fake messaging. And yeah, maybe even on some level, his family life was an artifice. It was sort of manufactured for public consumption. Now, that's me saying that from the outside looking in as someone speculating, but it looks to me like that was an arranged marriage. And if so, you have to wonder, does this woman have political ambitions? Because that's what everybody's thinking. This is your Kyle Rittenhouse. This is your, whatever. This is your political victim who is now going to give a political endorsement or maybe be a political contender in the future. That's what makes me a little skeptical. When she said this line about the cries of this widow will echo like a battle cry, and she goes up on the show a week after his death and says, we have more business than ever. We're going to keep fighting. It's like, okay, so now you're a political figure. Oh, and also I can't criticize you because you were the victim of a tragedy. Something's not right there.
I was surprised, Vic, that maybe I hadn't consumed enough of your content at this point in time when Charlie was murdered, but I think I tuned into the live stream that night, assuming that you were like, this is a setup. I think a lot of people tuned in thinking that would be the case. It seemed as though you were quick to vehemently deny it was any kind of paid person to kill Charlie. You were like, this is an actual person,
he ordered the hit.
like a crazy person that killed him. Like, why was that so quickly your stance, I guess?
Well, because the big reason why I doubted there was any conspiracy is because Trump is in charge. So who would be conspiring? The FBI? It's Trump's FBI. Who would be conspiring? Trump's intelligence agencies? Trump was an ally of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was not a radical. He was not a disruptor. He was a reliable ally of the system. He was a reliable ally of Israel, a reliable ally of the Trump government, a reliable ally of all the special interests that power the Trump government. Like I said, Turning Point was bringing in $140 million per year because they were happy with Charlie's work. So if somebody like Tucker got killed, everybody would know who to blame. If somebody like Candace got killed, everybody would know who to blame. Same thing with me. But the idea that Charlie Kirk was some kind of martyr for telling truth to power is so ridiculous.
They killed Charlie because he was a truth teller.
He was an ally and a pawn of the power. Moreover,
That's so true.
you look at the assassination.
That's true.
There were all sorts of doubts and questions that were raised in the early days. But when you really get down to it, this was not a sophisticated plot. The rooftop where Charlie was shot from, everybody had access to. No ladder required, no special equipment, freely accessible by anybody there. The event had no security perimeter. So they weren't looking at tickets, they weren't checking IDs, anything like this. He got shot once in the neck, and then chaos. The guy turned himself in a couple days later. The idea that this was some kind of super sophisticated plot that required know-how and planning, it just isn't true. They were lax. They did not do their due diligence. The idea that somebody walked up on that rooftop without encountering security, which was freely accessible to anybody, and took a shot, to me, that's not crazy.
Okay.
And I would say
hopefully
that
they end at the end of this.
We have a lot of that going on.
Point.
Luigi
Otherwise, I gotta
Mangione, there
go
was a school shooting the
dinner.
same day that Charlie Kirk got killed in Colorado. There was a school shooting by a transgender a couple weeks before that. So I think that, I guess the two flaws in the conspiracy thinking is, one, the idea that Charlie was a target of the powerful, and two, that we don't have a problem with left-wing violence or, crazy left-wingers that want to kill right-wingers. That's very real. So at the end of the day, I just didn't see any compelling evidence for a conspiracy.
There was no benefit to there being a conspiracy.
Right, yeah. There's nothing tangible at all.
That's interesting. I'll say personally, I thought that the interview with him and Shapiro, and he was like taking anti-Zionist views, seemed to be fairly compelling at the time. But my thing with it was, I was like, is Charlie really that influential though? Like, I don't know.
That's
maybe
also
in my circles,
true as
he's
fuck.
not super influential.
Even that, you got to understand, because people brought up that interview. So what happened that day? Tuesday, the day before September 10th, Israel bombed Qatar, which is a close ally of Trump and the Trump family and many people in the Trump cabinet. And it infuriated the White House. This was like so out of line and so unprecedented for Israel to do this. Charlie Kirk, to cover it, brought on Ben Shapiro and asked Ben Shapiro, hey, so do you think Israel's losing the PR battle? And let Shapiro freely answer with no pushback. So people say that that was Charlie pushing. I think that Charlie was playing devil's advocate. I think he was pushing the pro-Israel line by standing in for a skeptical Gen Z guy.
True.
Asking what that guy would ask so that Shapiro could make the case. And there's a big difference between the two. I don't think that he was fighting on that issue.
We went on a bit of a tangent there, but what's one thing your mother taught you?
Well,
Okay,
my
this
mom
has to be the
taught me a
last
lot,
point.
and my grandmother too. My mom and my grandmother they're Italian, very old school. You'd say they're grease balls, and so
Bro,
they
just
have
call
kind
his
of an
mom a
old world
grease ball?
sensibility. I feel like a lot of
What?
white people, like you, like white people that are real, like waspy, like real whites. Whoops, real whites. They have this kind of like their parents went to
Admits it.
college. Their parents listen to Radiohead. Their parents saw Star Wars in the movies. They like comic books. And so they have this very maybe hippie or liberal sensibility. My parents were very old school, very salt of the earth. Maybe you could say hardcore. And I guess the biggest lesson that my mom taught me, of which there were many, the one that stands out is that you never have as many friends as you think you do. My mom, my grandma, they always used to say, if you can count your friends on more than one hand, you better count again. Because a lot of people like to say, oh, I got this friend and that friend. But how many of those people really have your best interest in mind? How many of those people are real friends? They also used to say, you spend your summers where you spend your winters. In other words, the people that are there with you when you're riding high, when you're successful and everything's going right, they're not the same people that are with you when things are not going so well, when you need help, when maybe you're a liability. And you should share your triumphs with the people that are there for you when you're down. So I was really inculcated from a very early age with this kind of maybe wisdom about how people are, about loyalty, about what real friendship looks like. And I think that informs all of my politics. It's about looking for your people, looking for who's really your own kind. And that doesn't necessarily mean your own race, necessarily. But it means taking your own side, looking out for your own best interest, looking out for yourself, your family, your friends, your allies. That's really what my whole politics is based on some level, is that politics of personal loyalty. I guess that's the biggest thing that I was taught in a number of different ways.
You mentioned earlier in this interview losing 8 of 10 of your friends around
8
the
of
January
10?
6th incident. You said there was no one in particular that stuck out as being a hard one to lose. Who's that person that's kind of been there with you for all of it that maybe you haven't talked about? You don't have to dox
Paul
them, but
Pound.
Well, there's been many. I've met, and that's a lame answer, but
who's the person you call when something really bad happens, I guess?
well, nobody. To be honest with you, I'm not really close to anybody like that, unfortunately. When you're someone like me, you can't trust anybody. And the reason why is because when somebody
Yeah, I
really
actually,
wants to hurt
after
you
this one, I just
or
have to end.
kill you,
I'm so hungry.
they know that they can't get to you,
Ethan
they'll
Ralph.
go for the next best, which is the person you trust, the person you care about, and maybe that person loves their family more than they want to protect you. And so you realize that if more than one person knows anything, it's not a secret. And so that goes for any weaknesses, vulnerabilities. You really can't confide. And it's sort of sad. That's a luxury that people take for granted, that they can confide in people and get comfort. You know, they could get a sort of peace of mind. But this is the struggle of a warrior, of a true leader. And not to sound self-aggrandizing in that way, but that's really what it means to be, in my opinion, a man. Is when you are a man, you're not contingent. People lean on you. You don't lean on anybody. And at the highest level, which is politics, that's maybe the highest level of human competition. If you're seeking a leadership position, if you want to be a leader, you have to be completely self-reliant. And you can't actually have